Greetings and welcome to another episode of The Radio Shop. This is going to be the first of the repair videos that we will do. Today on the bench we have an RCA 65X1. It happens to be what some people call an All-American 6, which is the All-American 5 tube complement with an extra RF tube on the front end. So we're going to be opening up this here. Supposedly untouched, but who knows, it may have some repairs in it. RCA 65X1. Looks like it's going to need a brand new plug because that one is getting bad, and the whole rest of the cord probably can just go away and we'll get a new one when we get that far. We're going to open it up here in just a second. I'm not going to bore you with the details of me opening it up and see what capacitors we need. So just a little tip as we get started here. The knobs were almost frozen onto the shaft, and some people were like, well, how do you get them off? Well, I found, and I just happen to have this one, automotive trim removal tools will work these knobs off really well. I have some with bigger slots than this, and usually that's what I use. This is just the one I happen to have, and it happened to work. Also, I usually take a plastic Ziploc bag from electronics and things I've gotten, and I put the parts, screws, everything that go with a particular radio in a baggie, mark what it is, and put it aside until the radio's done. That way I don't lose the parts. Now that I have the chassis separated from the cabinet, I'm going to make a little correction here. This is an AA5 because this is a 65X1, and I had the paperwork pulled for a 66X1. So 66X1 is a 6-tube radio. This is a 5-tube string radio. This is also a transformerless radio, so all the tube heaters add up to voltage for line voltage. So it is a hot chassis radio. Recommend running it with a isolation transformer, of which I have one right there, along with a signal generator, my tube tester, and some other goodies. Probably another thing of note is we will probably have to deal with the silver migration on the mica capacitors in these particular IF transformers. They tend to cause lots of lightning crashes. We'll see first before we take them apart and do to see if we actually get lightning crashes, because these may not be the cans that have it, but I have a feeling they are because they're about of that age. Alright, we're going to look underneath and see what capacitors we need. Bit of surprise for us under here. Somebody has already been in here and started to do some work. So there are, most of the capacitors have been replaced by someone else. And there's still one or two, at least one wax capacitor still in here. They probably didn't have the replacement for them or thought, oh, we can just leave this one. But as I stated earlier, all capacitors are bad. Now, I usually hate dealing with a radio that somebody has already worked on because I never know what they've done. So I'm just going to assume they did it correctly, but I'm going to check their work to make sure they took the filter capacitor out of the circuit, which it looks like they did because it was right there where they've got the two new ones clipped in. Sorry, this thing does not have autofocus and I have to focus it. So I'm going to replace this one wax cap that's left and turn it on and see if it does have the dreaded silver migration or silver mica disease, or SMD as some people refer to it. We'll be right back. Might get in the way. It's kind of hard to see. My shop is not that conducive to videotaping because this is the first time I've tried this, but we're going to cut this out, and if I have to speed it up, I'll speed it up. So generally I clip them out because I don't know why somebody would go through all of that and replace everything, but unless they were doing it one capacitor at a time and had the lightning crashes and decided to quit right there, some people will do that. So anyway, I've got my new capacitor in there, and soldered onto the old leads that I leave. I'm also going to get rid of this because I don't know why we would have left that crappy thing on there, but we did. So, unsoldered the old cord here, and I'm going to pull it out. Some people actually, I've seen them do it, and especially technicians of old that wanted to just go through and fix it as quick as they could and smack it out and get it out of their shop, was they'd cut the old cord off here or just inside, leave it soldered on, and solder onto the old thing. So that's ready for the trash. So we're going to find a new cord and get that put on there. Got a brand new, I don't know how well that shows up because it's kind of hard to see from down here when I'm looking up at the thing, but I got a brand new cord that I get these off the internet. Sometimes I get them from wjo.com, and my latest ones are going to be coming from oldradioparts.net. So they have pretty good deals on new cords. I'm going to get this cord soldered in and we'll go for a test. Okay, one thing you will notice is I did put the knobs back on the shafts because I learned the hard way one time. I was barefoot, standing on a concrete floor, reached down and flipped on a hot chassis radio and about jumped out of my skin because I got a shock because it was plugged in backwards, and that's what happened. So we're going to turn it on now and see. It may have a burned out pilot bulb. One of the tube filaments may be burned out. Somebody may have wired something wrong that wasn't me. We're going to see what happens here. Good sign so far. I always leave the volume turned down when I let a radio warm up. I don't know why. It's always been a preference of mine. Until it fully warms up, I don't turn it down. I think I heard the crash of a IF transformer even before I turned the volume up. And why, yes, there it is. So that is definitely bad IF transformers. I'm going to have to look on the schematic to see. I pick up absolutely nothing because they're so shorted that they are causing interference within the radio. Sometimes you can pick up stations and it just crashes every once in a while like lightning and thunder, but apparently these are bad off. So we'll be removing these and rebuilding these, and we will get back when we have one removed and ready to rebuild. I gotta make sure I've got the actual capacitors to do so. So we'll see you in a bit. Okay, I've already taken off 3 of the first IF can or the second IF can. I don't know which one's which in the layout because I didn't check the schematic to see which one was which. I was just going to do one at a time, but I've already removed this, this, and this, and you'll notice there's a red dot up here, and that's very important that I put it back in the exact same way. So I've only got one more thing to unhook, and then I can pop it off the chassis. So I think somebody had already been in here and had this stuff off, because usually the stuff's wrapped around real hard and then they gave up on repairing because these just popped off like the whole thing was hooked together. One thing I make sure I do when I do these is I take pictures. That's what the good old iPhone or your smartphone is good for. You take pictures where everything was hooked up so that you remember where to put it back. It's much better than drawing. Just take pictures. So I pulled the two tubes on either side of it so I could get to the clips. So there's a clip here and the same clip on the other side. You pop those off and it should come right out. So I made just a small scratch on the chassis here so I knew which side the red dot went on. I also, before I take one of these apart, I will mark the side that has the red dot with the Sharpie so that I know how to put it back together. I think somebody's had this one apart and we're going to find out what they did to it, because it appears it was very loose on the chassis. It almost looks like it was a replacement one. And we're going to see what happens. So basically this was a replacement, or IF transformer somebody put in. I don't know if you can tell. This could be out of focus. I've got it under a magnifier glass. It may or may not focus. Hard for me to tell from up here. It had 6 lugs on it. Somebody cut it down to 4. Probably worked okay, but it is one of the types that has the bad issue with the migration of the silver on the mica plates. So we're going to have to drill this rivet and pull out the mica sheets and replace with some new capacitors up in there. Okay, we have gotten the rivet out and the piece of plastic holding down there was a sandwich of, you can see a piece of metal from this leg heading over towards this leg. There was another one over here, and sandwiched in between that is a piece of mica, and it'll be all corroded and they will short out. They're not supposed to short out. It's supposed to be a capacitor, and they short out, and that's what causes the lightning storm crashes you hear on a radio with this particular problem. So we're going to cut out the sheets, get rid of that particular capacitor, and I'm going to put in some regular silver mica capacitors, and we're going to go from there. So what I ended up having to do was, for these was put the new capacitors to replace the old capacitors, which were mica sheets with the bad silver migration on them. I had to put them on the outside because it wasn't big enough. Also, there was an extra capacitor, because there were 5 lugs on the original thing. There was an extra capacitor in there that I had to add back into the circuit to make it work. I haven't tested it yet, but we're going to test it in just a bit. I have to do a little bit of insulating on the bottom of this IF can because I had to put in a different one, because the one I was drilled out, I ended up breaking it and the little legs fell off, so I had another one that I also had to rebuild, and we're going to see how it works. I had to replace this 3.3 meg resistor going over to the IF transformer because the one they had in there looked kind of raunchy, and they had another 1 meg on top of it to try to make it 2 meg, and it ended up reading like 9.9 meg, so I'm not sure exactly why they piggybacked a resistor over the resistor trying to lower the resistance. I guess it had drifted up. This one I put in was showing about 3.4 meg, which will be okay in this section. So I also had to replace a couple of pieces of rubber coated wire. I left most of it intact because the rubber was still pretty good on it, and there were a couple of pieces where it crumbled where I touched it. Everything else seemed to be okay. I replaced what needed to be replaced, and we're going to try for power up here in just a minute. There's some of the work that the previous owner did, and we'll see you in a bit. So no more lightning crashes. You can see the set works. We're going to work on the cabinet next. So stay tuned and we'll So we're on to the cabinet. As you can see here, this cabinet has a lot of dirt flecks. I think that's spider poop right there. Kind of some discoloration, oxidation. We're going to try some polish on it. I've used Brasso in the past, and that's probably what we're going to use on this, is some elbow grease and some Brasso. Once again, it's not something I'm going to sit here and show on camera because you'll get bored out of your cord. We're going to try to polish it up and see what happens. So here's the polished up product. I didn't get it totally cleaned up, but I got it looking much more presentable than it was before. It's all shiny. Nice. Don't know what this is for. I think some models there may have been a little plaque there or whatnot, but every photo I've seen on the web does not have anything there. So apparently this was a cabinet used in other models at the same time. Well, it no longer has